Welcome to Authenticity Unleashed. I'm your host, Pam Rader, and I have a beautiful guest with me today, Akary Busto. And Akary is a transformational specialist and emotional biohacker with years of experience helping women through their trauma, which I love. She's the founder of Akary Mind Body and Soul, where she utilizes tools like human design, breath work, sound healing, and real time heart rate variability tools to help women discover how to make their nervous system their powerhouse. This is right up my alley. I'm so excited for everybody to hear what you have to say today. Thank you for joining us today, Akary.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, I love to start the conversation by letting our listeners get to know a little bit about you. Can you share a little bit about your own healing journey and what led you to become a transformation specialist and an emotional biohacker? And then maybe tell us what the heck an emotional biohacker is?
Yes, absolutely. It's really complex to be human. And in that complexity, we're constantly trying to figure things out. And I'm the oldest of five children on my mom's side. On my dad's side, I'm the oldest of three, the only girl with my dad, and then one of three girls with my mom. And so growing up in these different kind of spaces was a challenge. And I recognized that at a very young age, there was a lot of dependency on me to figure things out. So, very parentified and had to be very hyper independent to help everyone kind of catch up. So, I ended up
I
having
knew
to
I
be,
recognized you.
you found me. Yeah, you're like, hey, you. So I became an expert mom, taking care of people and a caretaker and leaving myself to the last, space available, if that. So everyone else's problems became mine, and I became the go-to person for everyone except for myself.
And there's a cost to that.
Yeah, there definitely is. And so learning and really creating boundaries around who I wanted to be versus what my parents were trying to make me. Like my dad wanted me to become a business person. My mother wanted me to become a corporate person. And I was never asked, what do you want to do? And at that point, I wouldn't have had an answer because there were so many different things that I wanted to be, but it was always looked down upon. And so I never really got a chance to go into that discovery place that we want our children to go to so that they find a joyful life.
That's interesting. I like we even looking back, like I'm 53 now, and I don't think that my brain had the awareness or the capacity to even imagine the career that I've kind of carved out for myself now, nor I would imagine it would have been the same for you. We couldn't have even named it if we were asked.
No, not at all. I think we grew up in a time and a space that just wasn't available for us.
Hmm.
And I think because it wasn't available for us, we have created that for our children in a place where I'm really happy that I don't resonate with my daughter. I feel like, oh, that's awesome because I have no idea what this is like. And it's exciting because we're venturing into new places. We're the pioneers of a lot of different things.
Amazing. So, did you hit a wall before you had to sort of seek out your own healing, or was it a gradual?
It was a big wall because, my mom is very much a person who wants to be done her way. And so a lot of narcissistic traits that came along with her own story and her own trauma.
Hmm.
And, it really affected a lot of my upbringing because I could never be my own person.
Hmm.
And everything that I wanted to do, it was just always looked down upon. And it didn't matter what, it was never good enough.
Hmm.
And growing up with all of that unspoken expectation is very heavy. So I did hit a wall and I would get shamed for wanting to cut my family out of my life. It was just so much that I was just like, all right, just everybody get out. And so it was really looked down upon. And I know it affected my siblings because I would go no contact with her for several years. I never really carried a lot of guilt with that because it felt good. It felt good to be free.
Hmm.
So I did hit a wall. It took a lot of back and forth and the competition between an unhealed mother with a daughter who's just trying to get validation or trying to get approval or just trying to live her life and not having that was really difficult. So once my daughter started her teenage years, I started to recognize these patterns coming from me and the need to really do my work in order to free my own
You
family.
did as I see it, when we're brought up in a family that's like, maybe there's some narcissistic tendencies or for whatever reason that we are parentified. I also was, but for different reasons. We become hyper independent. We're never really modeled how to create boundaries. We were shamed for asking for what we needed. And so the pendulum swings. You're either all in taking care of everyone else or you cut them out. And it's just because we never learned anything in between. No one ever showed us or modeled that for us. But as with anything, I mean, especially in Buddhism, the middle path is usually the way. So learning those healing enough that we can communicate our needs and then maybe finding a middle path where we're not cutting people off, but able to be in a different kind of relationship with them. I think that's sort of the goal. What do you have to say about that?
I think that's a very true fact. We're never taught how to be advocates for ourselves. We were never taught. I think that we were probably raised in a space that forced us to be victims of a lot of different abuse that was coming our way. And that was our normal.
Mhm.
That was our normal. So identifying that and calling it and naming it was very difficult. And you're right. We didn't have the modeling that afforded us the opportunity to not be the victims of so much abuse.
I think you're right, and that there were so many subtle kinds of abuse going on that was just normalized, but it's a different kind of abuse in terms of, I would say, it's our parents doing the best they could given the abuse they suffered, and like it's just generational trauma coming through.
Absolutely.
And I love that we are in this generation where we're talking about all of this and hopefully creating a new world for the ones that come after us. So you created the um, Akari Mind, Body, and Soul. What does that represent to you? What is your mission?
My journey, well, there's a couple of things. So my journey really taught me that it isn't just about taking care of my body, it's taking care of my mind and my soul. And so it's a combination. My journey around that really, just woke me up to the way our medical system, our healthcare system has been created, where they see a part of you, but they don't really see how it works in the whole spectrum of
Yeah,
things. And
super
so many,
Newtonian, like dialed in. If
yeah.
it's your elbow that's sore, it must only be your elbow. Yeah.
And so they do something without recognizing that, oh my God, yeah, that elbow, right? And then all of a sudden the shoulder, and they're like, oh, well, I don't do shoulders. Well, hello, you just messed up my elbow. And it's that particular perspective that I think has hurt us so much as we've been expanding and growing and going through our healing journey, that I am really focused at not just working with your mind and your soul, but encouraging that body to come through. Because if we're not feeding our bodies, the nutrients, the minerals, all these different things that we need in order to prosper, of course, our nervous system is not going to be at its best. It's going to do what it can with what it has. But wow, there's so much more. And so looking at it from a holistic perspective gives you an opportunity to see where your deficiencies are, where are there weaknesses in your healthcare, and how you can look at yourself from a holistic perspective, take accountability for that, and step into your power and say, okay, you know what? I'm not drinking water because I was never raised to drink water. There was always soda in my home. So there's all of these, bad habits that were created for us that we never broke. And so it's an opportunity to take a look at things from a different perspective, not with me, forcing different things down your throat. It's basically just educating, giving you a lot of information that you can do you can start to modify how you're going through your life and noticing, because it really is about being curious at what works for you individually.
So you talk a lot about the nervous system, and can you just describe in your own words, because this is a fairly new concept for people. I would say I've been in this kind of work for a long time, but we've only been really broadly speaking about the nervous system and how to regulate it and how what dysregulation does in our lives for a couple of years. Like it's not been a mainstream topic. So can you just share a little bit about how important the nervous system is? Like you describe it as a powerhouse for healing. Why?
Well, if you're not regulated, if your nervous system is not in alignment with what you're trying to do, you're not going to be able to get to that higher level that you're searching for. So you master something, and if your nervous system isn't strong enough and resilient enough, then you can't really make it to the next step because you're self sabotaging, because there's the negative self talk. There's so many different things going along. And to add to that new concept thing, we typically say people who are having issues with food, whether it's too much or not enough, it is a nervous system issue,
Mm.
right? Working with that nervous system allows us to get to that next level.
So the
And
nervous system includes the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, the peripheral nervous system, the central nervous system, like all of the information that's traveling to and from your body is being processed through the nervous system.
absolutely, absolutely. Heart brain alignment, everything, it just really goes through that space. And there's a really interesting nerve. It's called the vagus nerve that goes from the back of your head, right, all the way down into your spine, touches every organ in your body. And so the vagus nerve receives all those receptors. They're getting constant information about what's going on in the 80% of your body and sending the information right to the brain. And only 20% of that information gets processed and sent back to the body. So imagine just how the amount of information that your brain is constantly trying to process, which is why sometimes we open our mouths and something weird comes out and you didn't even know because there was a slip.
Right. And, it's been my understanding that the nervous system is sort of more rudimentary in terms of it's just looking to keep the body alive, and it only has the past for reference. So when it sees something new, it's like, this seems like that, and this might be danger to me. And we live in a time and space now where it's not saber-toothed tigers that are chasing us, but social media. And if people like us or don't like us, and we perceive all of that the same way we might have perceived mortal danger earlier on in our evolution, what does it do to a person to live in that kind of state all the time?
Well, for starters, is the amount of cortisol that's running in through your body. And if we recognize what is really hurting us is all that stress. And so we talk about our generation and the amount of cortisol that was already running in through our bodies because super hyper independent and, being left alone to figure things out. So that's a huge piece. Imagine all of these years, it's just not sustainable. And so there comes a point where there is a breaking point and we have no idea what is happening, where we're going, what we're doing. And there is still not enough guidance out there that's going to walk you through this process because everyone says, oh, just take a nice deep breath. It'll pass. Well, it's a lot more than that because cortisol in your body creates a lot of different health issues,
Mhm.
cardiovascular to start with, right?
I've heard that also. Like when I was in my first marriage, I was married to a very abusive alcoholic. And I have recently learned that my cortisol levels would have been elevated because of that stress throughout, and that would have been passed on through the placenta to my son, who then struggled with anxiety and all kinds of things, you know?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so interesting how powerful that is.
It's a thing. It's a thing. And you know what's even more fascinating is that lately I've just been toying with the idea. There's a term that's coming through as well called epigenetics, where
Hmm.
trauma is actually passed down. And when we look at Holocaust survivors and their lineage, we're now able to see all of that. So the studies are coming in. So sometimes I really do feel because our womb does not have a filter,
Mhm.
that us really experiencing this cortisol. Imagine what a tiny little embryo has to experience as you're going through this fight or flight experience.
Right?
And so, how much of where we find ourselves being stuck comes from our parents, our grandparents, and back hundreds of years.
So lots of people listening have experienced trauma, and I want to say, when I talk about trauma, I like to qualify this. We have capital T trauma and then everyday trauma, but no one's trauma should be measured against anyone else's trauma, because what's hard for me might not be hard for you, and vice versa. If it feels traumatic to you or it causes you to be stuck, it's trauma. So when we talk about trauma, we use the term broadly, but many people have been there, and then they get emotional burnout. Maybe they feel stuck. What are some signs that someone's nervous system might be stuck in survival mode and they need some help? What are the physiological signs? What might be going on in their life?
Gosh, there's so many different, and everyone's really unique. So, not sleeping is one of them, not eating is another, constantly in anxiety, constantly worrying about things that aren't even going to come true because we're making up all of these mind stories. But a lot of it is it's just burnout. burnout, being exhausted because you're not sleeping. And it's just like cycles, right? There's cycles. They're just like loops of continuous stuff that just can't be broken with anything.
I've been come up against burnout a couple of times. Again, that hyper independence, like, we talk about, and like I can get things done and I've always worked hard. But I know for me, my first sign that I'm getting close to it now is I get short with people. My relationships start to set, like, my patience. Whereas then before the rest of the stuff happens, and now I'm on to it and I can sort of backtrack from there. Like, why am I so prickly? Why am I so irritated? It's sort of this lack of compassion or empathy or whatever. I'm just that's how I know I'm in survival mode.
That's interesting. I love that you have that awareness, though. It's key, right? Because with awareness, we can do something about it.
Yes. And so I think that that's a really great question, maybe for people to ask themselves, like when they've been up against a wall in the past, what were the symptoms and what came first? And to really start to become aware, because when we get present to it, we can disrupt it, right?
Yeah, well, and also understanding the unhappiness. When I'm not feeling in my joy, what is happening around me that is creating this
Hmm.
feeling of not enthusiastic anymore, waking up and just like, right? Not that any of us want to wake up and be like, look, the sun's out, let's go.
Yeah.
But it is really just stepping in and taking inventory of the hard things that we're doing because we do normalize having a hard life.
Mm.
And I hear it often from women, my life is hard and it's aging parents, children that are
I had a
leaving the nest.
I had a conversation about this with someone yesterday, a friend of mine, and we were talking about, I just said right now, like going through this period of my life that I'm going through, I'm just like not making any big financial decisions, not any big moving decisions. That, like, I've always been taken care of. I always will be. I'm just like leaning into that. It's going to be fine. And I've decided that, you know what? It doesn't have to be hard. Just because people say divorce is hard, because people say, well, there's this healing time. And I was like, who says? Like, it can be easy. I can lean in with ease. When we decide that work can be easy, I think we can have that experience. But you bring up a really great point. We've normalized and decided that life is hard. And if we actually normalize that life can be easy and joyful, maybe when the really hard stuff comes, we go, is that really for me?
Yeah, I think that's a big piece of it, right? Is understanding that everything is hard, but it's a choice in how we focus into that hard, right? That's
Well,
what I
there's
come up
hard
with.
that's growth. There's hard that, like, life has is full of things that will challenge us to grow. But then there's hard that is brought about by our own resistance to change, our resistance to
Yes.
how we think, how we think it should, or how it is versus how we think it should be.
We tend to get in our own ways sometimes, and it I think it's still passed down. I think it's still a learned behavior that we have seen in, the TV shows that we've watched, and we're learning. I feel like the TV is what has taught us what it is to be human. Like, what is it like to be human? Oh, look, I haven't been doing that. I'm wrong.
That's
So
terrifying if the TV taught us how to be human, isn't it?
but I mean, think about all the different messages that we've received, how, we're supposed to dress, how many kids we're supposed to have. It just feeds so much information, just as social media and all of that. It's just constantly feeding us
Yeah.
these messages. And that's what I think creates a lot of this dysfunction.
Well, I think that what happens is we're subconsciously hearing this is what you need to do to be accepted. And our greatest desire as human beings is to belong, right?
Of
And
course.
so then if we follow our own intuition or what feels like a line to us, that occurs for the nervous system as like a threat. And so we feel anxious when we go to follow our own hearts. And I think that that is also a big awareness that we can come to, is that just because I feel anxious does not mean I shouldn't do that thing.
Yes. Well, I feel like these rules of engagement have been created for us, and at the same time there's all this pressure on the other side of finding who you are at your unique core and then being afraid of taking that step because other people around you don't have that same courage to explore and to see really what feels good.
Mhm.
What feels good? What makes me smile? Even if it's not like a job that I go to take, but it could be a hobby.
Yeah. I just recorded a solo podcast the other day about this era in my life. I didn't expect my marriage to come apart. It was a shock to me. And of course, there was some devastation and some disorientation and all of that at first. And then all of a sudden, I kind of woke up and I was like, okay, this 30 years worth of work that I've done, I'm like, this is a miracle. My kids are grown. I have a blank slate to become anyone or anything that I want. And
Yeah.
I'm so stoked about that.
Your face is so lit up right now.
It's
It's
so
amazing.
good. I just was like, yum. Yeah, I could like look what I can do. And what a miracle that is. And I think we all have the opportunity to reinvent ourselves, but we spend most of our time in survival mode, which keeps the nervous system all stuck. So what are some tools that you would give someone to begin to regulate their nervous system and shift out of that kind of survival mode and reactivity?
Well, it's super easy, so this is why it's so challenging, especially for those people that have that belief that it needs to be hard in order to be worth it.
Mm,
So I call the heart she who knows it all.
mm,
And so I invite my clients to connect to the heart and not just, it's not just a tool of connect to the heart. There's a lot more to that. There's a biofeedback sensor that I provide them so that they can track their nervous system in real time. And that's the tool that you can see your heart rate variability and your resting heart rate and what's going on when you are calm. Because sometimes we think we're calm and then lo and behold, oh, that was not calm. There's actually a few notches down that I can take it to.
mm,
So that visual really helps. But if you are not anywhere where you can hook up to your sensor, you don't have one, really connecting to your heart, really taking that pause. And the more that you do it, the more you connect, the more you learn how to connect with your heart and just feel that heartbeat, the more it's going to become a habit. And the brain is so powerful and it has been created just to keep you safe.
mhm,
So if it keeps you safe, it keeps you from doing the things that you really should be doing. And so connecting to that heart, learning from ancestral technology, connect to the heart, it will give you an opportunity to recognize and ask yourself, am I afraid of doing this? Or am I really, or should I really be doing this? And so connecting to the heart is probably the easiest tool that I can leave you with where you can practice, you can, find meditations out there. I have one that's a heart connecting one that really helps you just stay in that space. It shifts the normal. It shifts the normal.
So, like, Joe Dispenza talks a lot about brain heart coherence, right? So, when we start to
Absolutely.
breathe into the heart and when we can connect those two centers of intelligence.
There's an alignment.
Yeah. And I would say what's interesting is I've had a fairly interesting life. I've been married 3 times. I've been an entrepreneur. I have been someone who follows my heart. I almost have a little bit of a reckless heart. My brain could probably get in there a little more sometimes. But I love my little reckless heart. It's all right. And then a lot of people are more conditioned to follow the brain only, and it's very scary for them to get down into their heart. And I have witnessed with clients of mine and people that have been through some work with me that when they've lived up in their heads for a really long time and we get them down into their hearts, there's actually some deep grief for all of the beauty that they've denied themselves. Do you run into that too?
Gosh, all the time. All the time. It is definitely a permission slip space where we can grant ourselves some grace and some permission to be a little reckless and to allow ourselves these big things that for whatever reason we hold back on.
Yeah.
So it is a big place for permission to explore. And Dr. Joe Dispenza's work is based off of the Heart Math Institute, and that is exactly who I work with. So the work is very similar. Of course, his is like exploded into what I'm appreciating is more studies that really help us ground into the work because it is easy. And it doesn't have to be so hard. And shifting into that space of life is already so hard. Why should my healing follow that same path?
I just love this. This has come into my awareness probably 20 times in the past 2 days. It doesn't have to be hard. And so it's just so magical. It seems to me like this is a message not just for me, maybe not just for people before. It's an important message for right now. It can be easy. Healing can
It
be
is
easy. I had an
it is us
experience.
and us in our bubble, right? And when you're in control of your bubble, nothing else can penetrate unless you allow it to. And that is where nervous system work comes in, because that toddler that's throwing a fit in a restaurant is going to rattle everyone's space. It's going to be in your face, and you get to decide, am I going to fall into a toddler's response to whatever stressor is happening, or can I stay in my own bubble and continue on with my life?
So I have this recent example that I want to share because I think it'll illustrate, and I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about it. In my first marriage, there was the physical violence, sexual trauma, all of it. And it was pretty nasty. My husband went to prison for trying to kill me. So it was a big deal. And I had the story, I had the story that trauma lives in your cells, and I carried that story, and then that showed up in certain ways in my intimate relationships, and I was very, at times shut down, and I had this story about how this trauma lived in my cells, and that it's just the way it is, and it's, and I don't know, it was like a few months ago, I just woke up and I was like, how would these cells that I have right now know anything about what happened back then unless I told them the fucking story? Because my cells are new. And I was like, I just keep telling that same story. And what if I told a different story? And you know what happened? It healed in me in 1 second. Like it reconfigured my entire brain. I felt my body be completely different. I feel like a completely altered human. And it happened that easy and in 1 second.
That's beautiful. I love that, because we carry this narrative. We are so arrogant as humans, and we think we know it all, and we say these stories to ourselves. That this is what's tricky about the brain, right? Is that the amygdala shuts down, and sometimes you're not even getting the full story. Your body remembers. But if we start to put two and two together, right? When we start putting the science together behind it, we realize that the hippocampus that's taking notes has these darn sensors and receptors that go, hey, cortisol, come here, I'm here. And so then cortisol goes to the hippocampus and it floods it. So then everything shuts down. It's a mess. The story is rewritten, and we take that story to heart. And that is the narrative that we carry throughout our lives. And so that is really what I work with. It's like, okay, so let's start peeling the layers of a lot of onions and start to reframe the story that you've been telling yourself, because that story has kept you small.
Mhm.
That story has kept you prisoner of your own life.
Yeah. And even this story, like I understand that trauma lives in the body and in the cells, but that's only part of the story.
It is only part of it.
It's only
Yes.
part of the story. Like we can rewire that. We like this epigenetics. We can recreate. And I think that's so beautiful. So talk to me a little bit about what role breath work plays in this, because you also teach breath work. We hear so much about breath work as a yoga teacher. I've been doing pranayama for years, but now it's a big fad, right? But how does breath work facilitate nervous system regulation and
So
healing?
we as women, a lot of us are very hyper independent, constantly doing things. And so for me, put me in a room by myself to sit and meditate, and that's not going to happen, because my brain's just conditioned to move and do. And so breath work for women like us, busy doing stuff, allows us to be in this meditative space, actively using our breath. And by actively using our breath, we kidnap the brain, right? Because there's music, there's breath, there's something for us to chew on. And then it allows us to disappear. It allows us to let go of everything that's around us. And then we can let our body rest. And then we can get that satisfaction of what we're seeking, right? That blissful moment of disconnection from the real world, and just let go. And so as we're working, as I guide my circles, I am looking for a way for women to disconnect. And then I add sound healing to it, so that the vibration of these beautiful instruments allow us to go into a nice space of healing, transforming, transmuting. And then you let go, you release. And so some women find it like very cathartic, like this is like, oh, it's a lot that I'm carrying. Some women just find their joy, and and it just depends on what you're carrying. My goal is to make sure that it's a positive transition. Again, I don't believe it has to be hard. I believe that we can go through the process. My goal is that once you're done, you feel better than when you walked in.
Mhm.
That's really my goal.
Now that when we're breathing in, we're stimulating the sympathetic nervous system, and when we breathe out, we're stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system. So
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
lot of breath techniques that have you elongate the exhale. But do you have any particular breath techniques that you would recommend that somebody just right now listening could be like, "Hey, I'm feeling anxious. What would work for somebody right now?"
There's so many like that box breathing and all of that stuff. I just think it's so individualized. Like I just think what feels good. And for some people, it's they hold their breath all the time when something comes up. So my whole thing is don't hold your breath.
Mhm.
Just connect. And what really works for me is that elongating of the exhale. It's just like little sips of air and then just letting
Yeah.
go of all of that stagnant oxygen that's stuck in your body because we're shallow breathers.
I like the 6, 7, 8 breath. Breathe in for 6, hold for 7, let go for 8. I find like I
Yeah,
can
and
do that
and,
one
you know
time and change my whole day.
that causes me a little of anxiety. That's why I really think that everything is just very different for everyone. My biggest thing is just connecting to my heart and imagining that my breath is flowing in and out of my heart space pushes away all of the stress that I'm carrying on my shoulders.
You talk about self-betrayal a lot
Mm.
as the root of a lot of struggles. What are some ways that we unconsciously betray ourselves, especially as women?
When we don't keep our own word to ourselves.
Right.
It's really easy to say, "Yeah, I'm gonna go and go walk at the park today," and then all of a sudden you're just like, "Well, maybe I won't go."
Mhm.
And so we betray our own selves, and when we betray our own selves, it's okay for anybody else to come in and betray us. And it's a very difficult thing to identify because it's normalized and it's okay for us to give up on the things that we really want.
One of the things that I work with over and over and over again is with all of my clients, no matter what, is creating non-negotiables in their
Mhm.
lives so that because if they don't have any integrity with themselves, i.e., keeping your word to yourself, nothing in your life will work. And so there has to be, even if it's just drinking a glass of water and getting to bed at 9 p.m. as a non-negotiable, there has to be somewhere in your life where you keep your word to yourself. Otherwise, you'll be a doormat.
Yeah, that really is the essential part of that self-betrayal because and there's a root to this, right? There's a root to this. If our caretakers betrayed us,
Mhm.
then that becomes a normal. And so then we then start to self-betray. Then we find partners who betray us. Then we get into
Talk about
relationships.
talk about how our caregivers betray us. What are some of the subtle ways that our care like saying that they're gonna do something and they don't do it?
That's one way, or, keeping us safe.
Yeah.
Keeping us safe. If they can't keep us safe, then what makes it okay for us to keep ourselves safe? And we end up in
Ooh,
these
that
really
resonates a lot. I was just watching the little Mel Robbins clip with Gabor Mate, and
Mm,
you've probably seen it where she
mm.
talked about waking up when she
Yes,
was 9 and some kid was on top of her. And he said the trauma happened before that because
yes,
you didn't feel safe to share that with your
you
people. So
can.
that was the
You
trauma,
can.
like the betrayal. I was like, oh, that almost kicked me right in the gut when I heard that. I was like, wow, that's so
Yes.
real.
And that is the root.
Yeah.
That is the root is not feeling safe enough because our parents betrayed us in a way that didn't make it safe for us to come and ask for help. And so trauma happens when there is no connection
Uh-huh.
and there's no safety.
Wow. I think almost everyone can relate to that on some level.
Yeah. Yeah, no
Yeah.
safety and no connection, right? Because if something happens and you can go to your mom, to your dad, to an aunt, to a relative that's safe, that connection happens. And then you get that validation that it wasn't your fault. And then you can feel good and move on. But when there's no safety and there's no connection, then we get trapped in that space.
Wow. And so you said we repeat that pattern in relationships. So we'll seek partners that betray us.
Yeah, because that's our normal and it's in our unconscious, awareness. It's like there's that permission slip to it's okay
So
for
we
you.
read all these self-help books as women and we're doing big corporate jobs and we're smart and we're raising kids and all of that. And then we still keep just our picker is broken because we the nervous system will hijack and make chaos, the chaos that we know feels safer.
Yes. And so there's a term for that. We call that post-betrayal trauma.
Ooh.
Yeah. So when we do not heal from that root, we continue that. And so a lot of the things that we're dealing with, the high stress, the cortisol, the self-sabotage, the not keeping our own word, it all stems from that. That's why the nervous system is such important work. It's that it's rooted in that narrative that needs to shift, because we are so, like, we can continue this talk around arrogance. So here I've created the story, and then there's a whole other piece of that story that maybe mom had had surgery and was not able to be there. Maybe she had had a baby. Like, there's so many different ways that we can come in to change that narrative that we have created such a story. Like, this is my story and I'm sticking to it, and not have any flexibility to shift it.
I think that we all experience the life of the story that we tell about life. And so if you are having a crappy experience, it's time to upgrade your story.
Gosh, yes, please do. Please do. You deserve to have a new story. You deserve to be free from the shackles, right? It reminds me of the elephant with the rope around his leg and tied to a chair.
Yeah, right? Oh,
That's what
that's good. That's a good metaphor. So this post-betrayal trauma, you called it?
yeah,
Very
yeah.
interested in this. I think I've never heard that term before.
Uh,
And I know that this can happen for men and women,
oh,
not
yes.
not just women. What
Oh, yeah.
how else does that show up? Do people like go into more hyper independence, like I don't need anybody and they don't trust?
So we're talking about metabolic issues,
Mhm.
right? We're talking about food issues. We're talking about cardiovascular issues. Our cortisol is so high, constantly on the go. And so if we're in these high corporate positions where, like you said, like maybe there's a little bit of that snappiness. I mean, I've experienced it with previous bosses,
Mhm.
and going, whatever it is that you're going through, like, you're taking it out on me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right? And we tend to do that, and I've seen it with women as well as with men, where something's happening behind the scenes. It's like back to school. That kid that's bullying you because they're being bullied at school, now we're putting it into a bigger arena,
Right.
right? You have a boss that can't regulate his nervous system because whatever's going on at home, he's bringing it to work. That is that post-betrayal expression in the work, is like someone is just not regulated, and it's causing a ripple effect across, like, the whole, like,
So
it's wild.
talk to me about what human design is and how does this play into your work?
So human design is fabulous. It actually found me. I wasn't looking for it. It is a system that was created from 5 other systems, which is like just and old systems. The I Ching, which is the Chinese book of wisdom, the Kabbalah, the tree of life. We're talking about the chakra system, the Hindu chakra system. Then we add Eastern and Western astrology, and to make it even more complicated, why don't we just add quantum physics to it? So complex. And I because of the breath work, I was interviewed on a human design podcast, because we realized that through breath work, we're able to start shedding some of these hard beliefs that we have.
Mhm.
And so I was interviewed and we were talking about it. And all of a sudden, I started getting a huge amount of women who were coming to me with their human design. And as I started peeling the layers of their human design, we started finding so much trauma.
Mm.
And so I dove really deep into it, thinking I was going to find where's the trauma in this chart? And I started recognizing that it's so unique to everybody, depending on the chakra centers that are open or defined.
Hang on,
It
I
has,
just lost volume here. 1 second. I don't know what happened with the volume.
I can hear you.
Mic, camera, speaker. Say something there.
I can hear you.
No, why did that go out? Default speakers. Yes. Interesting. Give me one
I'm like, I
second
didn't touch
here.
anything. It wasn't me.
I have no idea why that has no sound, but let me just try that. See if it's on my end or not.
Can you hear me now? Hello, hello.
Speaker. No, I
Can
still.
you hear
Oh,
me?
there we go. Now I've got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
like, I didn't touch anything. It
Yeah.
wasn't me.
No, I don't know. It just kind of switched. Every once in a while, it'll switch microphones or switch speakers or whatever. So, okay. All
Oh,
right.
thank you.
Carry on.
Okay. So human design gives you an opportunity to see yourself, and I would say before the trauma happened. And it gives you an opportunity to understand why you were susceptible to it, right? These centers have energy, and it's not personal. It's just who you are by design, but it also gives you the opportunity to see, oh, if this was by design, then this is how I get out of that. This is
Right.
how I make that step out of that terrible narrative that I was carrying because it was just by design.
Okay.
And so there are 5 types in human design, and each type is how they are supposed to carry themselves out into the world. So there's a manifester, there's a generator, there's a manifesting generator, there's a projector, and a reflector. And each of these types tells you how you're to be out in the world. So I am a generator. I am just a generator. But I am here to master the work that I love, and I am a worker bee. And it's all true, right? I love to work. That is what I'm designed to do. And I never really understood it. And then you add more to it because it's so multi layered. And you recognize that I'm also a researcher. I have a lot of scientist energy within me. I'm very curious about things. I like to explore and try things. And so my parents did not like that. My parents just wanted me to find the one thing that I was going to do for the rest of my life. And they were just like, why are you doing a million things? And so it gave me the opportunity to make peace with all of those pieces of myself that wanted to do different things, that wanted to experience things.
Hmm.
And so I think it's really important for any one of us to recognize, who are we? And if we have children, who are we raising? Because it helps us define what our children need from us versus us think that we know what's best for them, and why we have such a disconnect sometimes with our children, our partners, our parents. It all comes together.
So I have this interesting, I think it's all beautiful, and there's like, I'm very much into astrology and all of that. And then I see this subsect of people that will take on some of these things like human design or whatever, and they dabble in it enough to label themselves and then be done with it.
Well, embodiment is what we are missing. And so you have people who also love to go do these ceremonies, plant medicine and
Yeah.
whatnot. And I look at it, even someone who goes and gets a tarot card reading.
Mhm.
It's like, what are you supposed to do with all that information?
Mhm.
If you don't know what to do with it, then you're just sitting on it. And it's such a fantastic tool to get you out of where you are and take you to the highest expression of who you are. You're missing out.
Right. Embodiment, that's the whole thing. It's through the physicalness that we experience empowerment and possibility in our lives. Our knowledge does not make a difference, our action does.
Yes.
And so to go seek out these things as knowledge, it's just another party trick if we don't actually. And that's where I think people like you come into play. Like implementation,
Yes.
information is free, but implementation requires, I think, sometimes an investment in ourselves and some accountability and working with someone who has some experience. Tell us a little bit about where people can find you, how they could work with you. And you've got something called Wild Women Wednesday or something.
I do. I invite women to come and facilitate on 2 Wednesdays a month, every second and fourth Wednesday of the month. And they come and they teach the community about whatever it is that they're learning, whether we're talking menopause, where we're talking Chinese medicine, just things that are outside of the box and outside of the realm of the mainstream.
Mhm.
Because by giving women an opportunity to tap into the box of things that they don't know, then they can make conscious decisions of what it is that they want to tap into and be curious about what this may bring to my life.
Right. And what impact has that had on your community?
It's been amazing. I've seen women who have gone from not knowing what Reiki is, right? Energy work, to being Reiki certified and practicing. I've gone from women who have had issues getting pregnant, and all of a sudden they're working with a Chinese medicine acupuncturist and going through the protocols and had no idea that that was available for them.
Mhm.
So we're constantly learning, and I'm learning with them because I find it, it's part of my human design. I love to learn. And so bringing all of these new pieces into our space, it gives us an opportunity to share in that learning.
And so, where are you located?
I'm actually in Long Beach, California,
Oh,
where we're going to be having Olympics here soon.
cool.
Yeah, we're
So,
going to have a map. We're going to have a big target on our map.
where can people find you?
My website, ekare.com, has an opportunity for you to bring your chart and find it. There is an opportunity right there and then to download a free 12-page general report. Or if you're like me and like to read more, there's a personalized report that can be created and You can download it into a PDF. I've created audio reports for those people that just want to hear that,
Mhm.
the story of them. So that's a perfect place. Or you can find me on Instagram, Akari Breathwork at Instagram.
Amazing. We'll put that down below in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom, your thoughts with us today. I appreciate you and the work that you do in the world. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Hey, beautiful.